Sandra, how come SBS Bank's rates are so good?
Because they're owned by their customers, not greedy shareholders, so we get a better deal.
Really? Always wanted to own a bank.
In 1956, a handful of Invercargill Cycling Club members organised a bike race in the grand European tradition. Multi-day racing, taking in everything that made bike riding in Southland great. That race has been through many evolutions, but 6 decades later, it continues. In 2016, the SBS Bank Tour of Southland celebrates its diamond anniversary as 20 teams of riders prepare to take on the roads, hills and weather of Southland, battling it out over 7 stages and 850 kilometres for the honour of being the 60th anniversary champions. This is the 2016 SBS Bank Tour of Southland. Another day, another new leader. For the 6th day in a row, the SBS Bank Tour of Southland was turned on its head during Stage 5 from Invercargill to Gore. With Michael Vink seemingly in control of the race as the peloton departed the city, it was a surprise to most, including the major general classification hopes, when a 20-strong breakaway established an early lead, which got out to a 6.5-minute lead. In cold, wet conditions, that proved to be too great a margin for the bunch to close down, and was enough for Olympic track star Aaron Gate to claim the stage win in a 2-up sprint against Aidan Tuvey and don the yellow jersey with a 2.5-minute lead to take into the final day of racing.
Oh, team morale's pretty good. I mean, with our day on Coronet Peak, we'd already ticked all our boxes anyway, so now we're just trying to get everyone to the finish in good shape and on their bikes. Nice day today, horrible weather yesterday. I thought I'd go alright in the tough conditions, but yesterday I was suffering. Physically I was fine, I was just so cold. So I've never been that cold in my life. Murphy's Law, you know, like the one time we didn't push, the whole 20 people went away with 2 solid GC riders in there, and they rode all the way to the finish. And I think perhaps the weather took a little bit of a sting out of the chase. We had guys up the front, but it was not a full all-in concerted effort.
I've actually got pretty good legs and probably the legs to win the race, but just it hasn't unfolded this year, and that's just the way it goes. I think today, I mean, at the moment there's no wind, there's nothing, so to get off the bike just with a good day under the belt and to enjoy my last day on the bike, really. If I could win a stage, it'd be great. But to be perfectly honest, I'm really happy with this tour. I didn't need to win this tour or do anything, but I've definitely shown that I've still got the legs, and regardless of what happens today, I'm going to be pretty happy.
If it was 4K, it might be my thing. That'd be a bit closer to the track, but 13, it's still within grasp, hopefully, so we'll just have to go out there and herd as much as I can and try not to lose any time.
Here we are with the penultimate stage here in this SBS Bank Tour of Southland. Man versus the clock here in central Southland in Winton, Doug, just over 13 kilometres. There are some very good time triallists in this field this year.
It's exciting when you have a course like this which doesn't have any sort of major climbs of any such. It's a flat, it's a drag race, and yes, Julian, there are some fantastic time triallers in this field this year. Whether or not there's enough distance in this time trial for them to peg back any major time on the overall classification is going to be very interesting, but it's a drag strip and it is really going to suit some of these guys that are vying for the positions in the overall classification.
You're absolutely right. It's not a very long time trial, but certainly one that could still shake things up a little bit further down the general classification. Of course, Gate, the man in the yellow jersey, would have been thinking about this overnight. He He enjoys the time trial, but moreover about 4 kilometres typically on the track as a member of the New Zealand team's pursuit squad. But of course Michael Vink comes in as one of the outright favourites as we now look to one of the Barry Stewart Builders riders here. This is Morgan Smith. Now he's performed extremely well over the last few years in this time trial.
Yeah, it's interesting to note as well, the time trial, you do not get to use your own time trial specific rig, and there are no aero bars. So it is a very, very standardised format from an equipment point of view. Standard bike. These are the bikes the guys ride throughout the tour, and also the wheels. No disc wheels allowed either. So it kind of evens things out a bit in terms of the technology, but you still got to cover the ground, and these guys are really rocketing along. This is Hamish Bond from the Vantage Windows and Doors squad. Another fine ride.
And fantastic conditions here on the last day of the tour. They've got about 100 kilometres worth of racing today, of course, with this time trial and then the jaunt into Invercargill, and it's looking a fantastic day for those out in central Southland to experience these top riders from 7 nations over the past week. They've been watching the story unravel. Different yellow jersey every day. Will we see some more changes today? We'll wait and see.
And this is why we do have the time trial at this point in the SBS Bank Tour of Southland, because it does sort of make it even Stevens, if you like. It's a race against the clock. It's a race of truth. Here's Alex Frame from the Kia Motors team, and you can see lovely position, nice and low, very aerodynamic. His eye on the power meter all the way around, monitoring his effort, and he does look like he's over this, doesn't he?
Yes, a 3-time champion, Tino Tabak, of course, back in the 1960s, as we saw at the top of the week here, suggested that a time trial is one of the all-important aspects to be included in a tour. The Warwick Daltons of this world, all of those men would suggest it's required if you're going to find a true champion. Speaking of which, here is a 4-time past winner of this tour, Hayden Ralston. A lot of things will be going through his head, Doug, and it's his last ever tour.
Yeah, Hayden will be having a real sentimental journey along here as he thrashes himself to pieces, riding at the absolute limit of what he can do. He realises he's only got one more effort, as he talks about to us during the week. One more effort left to go after this, and Hayden will be dropping everything into this to try and get at least a stage win in the overall time trial and peg some time back.
So he's into the closing stages in towards the main streets of Winton as we now look at some of the top 10 contenders. And here's one of the outright favourites, Michael Vink. Of course, he's been a national time trial champion. He has won the stage before, so he knows these roads extremely well and is looking pretty sharp here, Doug.
Gosh, you can just see the speed that he's come around that corner. He's dramatically quicker than the other riders, and he will be fired up today. He'll be angry at himself for what has happened yesterday with the overall lead, and Vink has come into this with a real desire to win the stage and to show everyone he is still, if not the best bike rider in the field, in the time trial at least.
Well, we talk about all-round ability, and this is the man, of course, won up to Bluff Hill a few days ago. He has been right up there in contention with a lot of the stages, and of course here on the time trial, this guy is the full package here as he makes his way down. He's about halfway around the circuit here, and he is fair flying along these straights.
Yeah, he's putting in an impressive performance. You can see him coming in and catching at the rider in front of him. That looks like the under-23 jersey. Michael Vink has caught that rider in front of him coming into the finish, and it would not surprise me if he records the fastest time for the day.
Well, that was a 1-minute gap. Of course, they get away at 1-minute intervals, these riders. 106 starters here this morning in Winton as we now look to the Olympian, the man in the yellow jersey. He's a bit cautious around the corners here. Now, he'll know full well about some of the time trialling abilities of these boys. He'll be trying to limit his losses here. He knows it's a relatively short time trial, but he'll still be giving it 100%.
A couple of things that'll be going through Aaron Gates' mind is, one, stay upright, because if he falls off he's going to lose some serious time, and two, he's not the World Omnium or former World Omnium champion for nothing. He's probably one of the best all-round riders in this field this year, and hence he's got the yellow jersey on, but he will be desperate not to try and lose too much time, because if you do sort of have a shocker, as we used to call it, you could, obviously have a chance of losing things. But Aaron Gate has really ridden a storming ride. He's cutting in, coming out wide, and he looks strong.
And we've talked about the physical demeanour of a lot of these guys here, but this guy here is also a very smart bike rider. He's very calm about the situation. He just takes it one stage at a time here as the yellow jersey comes through the middle of Winton. Gate holds on to the yellow jersey, but the stage winner, Michael Vink, moves himself up into second place, clawing back more time and overhauling Kolvenhoven of the Netherlands. and standout times for Alex Frame and Ralston here on the time trial.
They all seem to be feeling good enough and all excited to get on the front, so we'll try and control the race as best we can and stop any of those threats getting up the road.
We've tried every day to win. Myself and the Knicks yesterday, I really wanted to win for the boys. One more chance. Hopefully A-Frame can get up the sprint, but it's not for lack of trying. We've been giving it beans every day.
I mean, it's the Tour of Southland, as we've seen already. Anything can happen, so definitely not counting my eggs yet. It's a long way into Invercargill still, so we'll just have to see what happens.
The 1990s and 2000s are the modern era of the Tour of Southland. In the mid-1990s, unofficial teams were getting out of hand, with riders organising half the field to work for one individual, so the Tour moved to the official team format we know today. The last Invercargill local to win the race was Doug Bath in 1994. Dunedin boy Brad Evans won in 2015, almost a Southlander, but not quite. The early 2000s saw the Tour's last great champion reign. Hayden Ralston won in 2006 to 2008 and again in 2010. Also in the 2000s, the Tour of Southland briefly took on UCI status. This lasted 6 great years, but the costs eventually outweighed the benefits. The Invercargill Velodrome opened in 2006. This brought the New Zealand national team south to train, and New Zealand became a global cycling powerhouse. Coincidence? I think not. Good on you, Southland.
Outstanding conditions in here for the 77-kilometre final stage of the 60th edition of this SBS Bank Tour of Southland, and there'll be a lot of riders here, Doug. Very pleased to see this day come.
A monumental part of the whole race, of course, is the fight for the last stage, and where there are a lot of people who have missed out, like the young Michael Vink here, you can see he's just won that time trial stage. There are a lot of other riders who have missed out on stages throughout the race, and they will be desperate given it's their last chance.
A relatively flat stage to the finish, and always very much a very fast stage into Invercargill, where they'll make a few loops around the Queen's Park to finish in the traditional finish for a number of years now into Gala Street. And as we said, it's Rion Nolan here of Placemakers on the outskirts of Winton who has put the throttle on right from the start here for the boys.
Yeah, there's a bit of survival going in. There's a few tactics of guys going off the front. The mood of the bunch will be quite nervous and anxious, and it's a very, very short and quick stage with a couple of lumps. So there'll be a lot of guys, including Aaron Gate, of course, the tour leader, who will be really, really making sure they're in a good spot. Don't want to have a crash, don't want to get in trouble, and want to be nearer the front without being called out.
In the back of the minds of some of the top teams, of course, is the fact that they might take out that final stage. Everyone's always very keen on any tour of which to come in front of the crowds, and there will no doubt be some great crowds in Invercargill today with these fine conditions that'll be looking to see the likes of these Team Skoda boys here who have decided to hit off very quickly. Team Skoda have obviously got a mission here today to try and take out this final stage when we look at Sam Phipps and West here, 35 and 33 respectively.
A lot of these plans will have been laid before the stage start, and a lot of the best plans, as we know in cycling, all go out the window once the racing starts. But this is a coordinated move. These boys have obviously talked about this before this stage, and it's somehow they've stuck and they've got off the front, but it's a big chasing peloton. You see it stretching out there single file, chasing these chaps. Whether they're going to stay away will be the challenge.
And it certainly is a big challenge when it comes to a final stage such as this. As we said, a lot of them all keen to try and pick up some extra dollars on the road, and there are a few dollars still available. There is still the possibility of the green jersey, the sprinters. Oh, there's some riders down, the touch of the wheels. The fatigue factor may well have set in here, and you can see some boys in a lot of agony. One of the ITM boys lying on the ground. I think I spotted Gordon McCauley in amongst it as well. Vantage also. This is not good here on the final stage of the tour, Doug.
Just a disaster, and it's the worst thing that can possibly happen to you as a bike racer, and this is pretty serious. This young boy from the ITM team looks like he's seriously hurt. We hope he's going to be okay. And of course, on the last stage, it looks like one of the Vantage team riders as well. As we talked about before, Julian, fatigue sets in. There's a nervousness and an anxiousness in the peloton on these last stages. There's a bit of desperation goes on, and we just hope that all those riders are okay.
And you can throw in here also the sorts of speeds that these guys are moving along at. We're up to around 60 kilometres an hour, so it doesn't take much to touch the wheels. As Gordon McCauley from the Business South team, you can see him just off the back. These are the guys, these are the remnants of the crash, trying to get themselves back onto this main peloton here. They want to be there at the finish into Gala Street.
The Spring Hills leg of this stage is very undulating, it's very quick. Coming this way is actually the way to go, but you can see here Nick Kugazoo at the front, just jumping behind the Barry Stewart rider there. Nick's got the Harcourt Sprint Ace jersey on his shoulders. He was only 3 points ahead of Aaron Gate coming into this final leg. He's going to have to make sure he's very attentive and take these preems along the way. Obviously preems around the park as well, so Nick's doing a good job at this stage.
Yeah, some great team tactics there, looking after the man in the Harcourt's green jersey. Of course, one of 6 classifications that can be won in this year's tour. And again, we see a bit of a break as they make their way up towards Browns here. They'll sweep left here very shortly. It's one of the PowerNet boys that have gone off the front. Looks like Ryan Wills. Now, he had a good time trial this morning, and Wills has opened a decent sort of a gap. And look at that, the yellow jersey has been allowed to sneak off. There's about a handful of riders here. A great example. He is one of, if not the strongest man here in the field this year.
One of Aaron Gates' abilities throughout this whole stage race is to be in the right place at the right time and also to be in the moves that count. He's very, very focused. He was the World Omnium champion on the track. He's not an all-round bike rider by chance, and I've just been super impressed with Aaron Gates' positioning. He's never, ever on any stage been caught out.
Yes, and of course he was speaking yesterday with 3-time champion Warwick Dalton, who gave him plenty of advice here for the young man in the yellow jersey. A couple of points he said was, if you're going to win a tour, you need to be aggressive off the front and you need to be consistent. Well, they are 2 aspects that this man has shown over the last few days indeed here. That is why he is the man leading this tour and is leading it pretty well here at the moment as they open up, I would suggest, around 20-25 seconds here on the chasing peloton.
They'll be relishing the conditions, and the roads around the back of Browns here coming through are just fantastic roads to ride, and we've all trained around them over the years, and on a day like this you couldn't get a better place to go biking. There's my nephew at the back, number 196, Hamish Beadle, racing for the Talbot Forest Cheese team, the old Timo team. He's had a great tour. He's going to finish. There are a heap of young guys that are so stoked. There's Hayden Strong in the middle of the crew as well, so big ups to them. Flick to the front, Jason Allen, one of the most experienced riders in this year's race. The Mike Greer team have really, really been lucky to have him, and he's been an asset for those guys.
And it looked like it was the Mike Greer Homes team that shut it down, now allowing the counter-attack to happen here with Michael Vink, a 2-time stage winner already in this year's tour, and you can see 3 back, the man in the yellow has been given the duties to try and shut it down. These are 1st and 2nd on the general classification. This is a great example of how much they hold this in regard to trying to take out a tour of Southland.
We've seen it happen before. The stage has changed hands on this last stage. Mike Northey's win was on the back of this last stage, so Aaron Gates being very, very, very careful here.
So the riders now making their way onto the outskirts of Invercargill into Herbert Street. They'll swing right at the roundabout here, and they'll do 3.5 laps here of Queen's Park.
Yeah, this is tough coming up this rise. There's some weary legs. There's a wee false flat comes up Queen's Drive. A lot of guys have jumped away in here in the past and have actually stayed away to win the stage. You right hand into Herbert Street, and then it's game on round the park. 4.2 Ks, 3 laps, and this is just going to be so fast.
The Cadence cyclery rider deciding that he's back in the United States as he heads down the other side of the road, gets himself up to the front of the peloton here as they stretch themselves up for another one of the sprints. You can see the flag indicating that there's one on either side of the circuit here, but for a lot of these riders it's all about trying to survive, and it's all about trying to position themselves into the big finish of Gala Street.
The crowd support for this year's 60th edition of the SBS Bank Tour has just been fantastic. The weather conditions have brought a huge crowd out from the local community here in Invercargill. It's just great to see them supporting what is an iconic bike race. But these guys in the bunch aren't really seeing that because they're just screaming around Queen's Park. And if you're too far back at this stage, it's probably too late given the speed of this race. And if you're setting yourself up for the sprint, you'd be wanting to do it right about now.
1 lap to go for these riders here. It is local man Zenovic that's decided to go off the front. The man from PowerNet team. He's in the top 15 in this year's tour, coming into this final stage here, and he's always aggressive off the front. Also a great shot just a moment ago of coming up that straight. It is one that you've got to judge well. From the corner, about 800 metres, it's a long, lengthy one that does climb, so you can't go too early. In saying that, here is the PowerNet team as they put Ryan Wills onto the front to try and soften the field up for one of their sprinters. Of course, they are the defending team from last year. They had Brad Evans take out the tour, and they're keen once again to try and get themselves a stage victory.
There's a bit of kamikaze work going on down Queen's Drive. It's very, very fast. The bitumen is very quick, and it does descend a wee bit down to this Herbert Street. And you can see some of the teams now, the Kia Motor squad, are moving up. They're moving their riders into position, and this is a really, really good example of a team aspect of the race where they get their sprinters into position and make sure they're protected and they're not out too early. This is just, these guys are probably going just a touch too early here, to be honest.
You have to be fully focused when coming into such a sprint finish here as riders jockey for position. You can see a few at the back there just quite content to cruise on home, but the top half of the field are putting all the pressures on, as we saw the likes of the Oliver's Real Food Racing off the front trying to get themselves a decent sort of a gap. Rider number 56, that is Ed Clemens of England, that one of 2 riders from England this year who is trying to get himself clear of this chasing bunch as they turn into the second last straight of the day here, the Calvin Street stretch here for the riders. And we saw Liam Aitchison up there as well, having a bit of a nudge as the yellow keeps content and sits there watching every move closely.
Yeah, he is never too far back, and Aaron Gate will be very aware that he's got to stay out of trouble. His mission here is to win the yellow jersey, and in order to do that, he's got to stay upright. So he's up there, but he's probably not thinking too much about contesting the final sprint. Otherwise known as Hayden Ralston at the front, he is thinking the complete opposite, and he's trying to get that stage.
So Barry Stewart leads, and all the leg goes flying up from one of the Cadence Cyclery boys. He gets his foot back in, but she's all over as we look down to the red. It is McCabe of the United States for the Kia Motors team. He's leading out, but here comes his teammate. Alex Frame comes up onto his shoulder. It's going to be a 1-2 for Kia Motors. Ascot Park, they have time to look over their shoulders and soak up the entire victory here. But the man in yellow, 2016 champion, the 60th edition, Aaron Gate, successfully defends his lead into the final stage into Invercargill here. An outstanding tour with some outstanding champions. What a way to mark 60 years of the tour. After 7 days of racing, we've seen 6 different leaders, but the most important of all is the final day, and that goes onto the shoulders of Aaron Gate, 2 minutes 40 over Michael Vink and Kolfenhoven of the Netherlands at 3:21. Nick Kirkzu did enough on the final day to secure the Harcourt Sprint Ace with 53 points over Gate and Magennis of Australia. While Tim Rush did enough a few days ago to secure the Jesco Hydraulics King of the Mountains on 26 points from Ollie Jones and Stephen Lampier. Young Aidan Tuvey comes across the ditch to take out the Henderson Construction Limited under 23 jersey. Fraser Hewitt of Southland holds on to the Stonewood Homes silver jersey by 2 minutes and 44 over Anthony Chapman. Sam Phipps of the Team Skoda team was aggressive on the final stage and was awarded the Southland Times Most Combative. While Kia Motors Ascot Park Hotel dominated throughout the week to take out the Wednesday Cycles team classification.
To get a win this big on home soil is just special because it's such a hard race to win. It's not one that you can just cruise on through and get lucky here and there. It was something that I really had to work for, and the team really had to help me get there. So yeah, it's phenomenal.
This one's been a real enjoyable trip. You know, this is the first time I haven't had to do it with the trade team, and you know, I'm really pleased I came down and committed to the Kia Ascot crew. Yeah, for us, the formula was pretty simple. It was just keep the pace hot, and we knew it worked pretty well with yellow jerseys, aspirations. So we just kept the pace on all the way into Gala Street pretty much and let the race go from there. And for us, we backed Alex and Travis, and I guess the result was what we wanted, and it was better than what we expected going first and second.
I think it's been a pretty exciting tour. I think the jerseys change hands every day. You know, there's a lot of talent. I've always said that, you know, right from day one. And for a number of years now, I've realised the talent in New Zealand is huge. You know, there's a few old guys retiring, but the future's pretty bright for Cycling New Zealand. I think, you know, now's the time they need to start investing in not just the track, but also a small development on the road in order to try and transfer a few of these guys over to the Pro Tour.
Every day's been an interesting race, but you know, it is the people in Southland that makes this trip and this tour worthwhile 8 times.
The race itself was a very good race, well run, and you know, that's why it's the number 1 race in New Zealand.
It's such an awesome race, and like I've said before, the amount of community support that gets behind it is just awesome, and Bruce has done a great job of just keeping it going and getting bigger and bigger each year. And it's one of those races that just throws absolutely everything at you, and this year was no different. But to come into Queen's Park in the sunshine with a great crowd of Southern supporters was just awesome, and yeah, it's a very special win.
Your leader, the captain, the
Follow the action from this historic race all week with live race updates, full results and pictures at www.tourofsouthland.com.